Awesome. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the third of the 7 live stream trainings that are part of me promoting my one-on-one container legacy, which is for coaches, mystic coaches, soulpreneurs who are really looking to be supported in their nervous system to create businesses around their lives. So it really is front end strategy, but it's really about the deep identity work that is required to show up congruently and whole and in your full humanity in your business. So today I'm talking about business and trauma, right? The way that trauma shows up in your business. And it's really the 5 major intimacy wounds showing up in your business and how to turn them into superpowers, right? And I'm gonna be sharing my 4-step healing process called Embodied Relational Presencing. And this practice, the 4-step practice, is something that has supported me over the years in becoming an entrepreneur. It has helped me, step in the moments where I want to hide, in those moments where I feel like a ton of shame or fear coming up around, doing the business stuff, right? Just actually implementing the strategies. It's really helped me a lot. So again, I'm Isabela. Say hi if you're watching live, or if you're watching on the replay, write #replay. So I'm just going to give you a brief outline about what we're doing. First, I'm going to talk about the 5 intimacy wounds. So I'm going to talk about the 5 intimacy wounds, but I'm going to talk about how they form so that you have a sense of like where it all comes from, makes sense to you in your own body, different ways you may experience them, why and how they show up in your business, in your messaging, how they show up in your online presence, how they show up in your sales process and marketing, how they show up in your relationship with money, and why it's important to resolve these as part of your success in business. I am not saying that you need to heal your trauma in order to be an excellent, and successful business owner. What I'm saying is that it's going to feel better in the quiet moments of your business, right? When you are making space for that becoming process, right? Where you're making space for the identity work, where you are not forcing yourself to do something, but that you are listening to your body and what it needs, listening to the parts of you that are scared. So that's all of the stuff I do. And the last part, I will just share with you the 4-step process that I use. So here's a little bit about how these intimacy wounds form. There are ways that you've learned to survive in your environments. It means your home, in community spaces, in society in general. And you've made decisions that, as part of that survival, you've made decisions. Some of them are conscious, some of them are unconscious, about how it's safe to be in the world. And because, our need to belong, our need for safety, our needs to be cared for and loved are stronger than our need for us authenticity. So for that reason, there are parts of us that we put away. We sort of lock really wonderful, juicy, authentic parts of us. We tuck those away, things that were maybe not welcome, unacceptable, frowned upon, disapproved of, or in the most benign way, just not paid attention to, like they weren't important. Those parts we put away because it's almost like an atrophy process where we're like, okay, we don't need that. We put it away and we bring forward the parts of us that are rewarded, that receive accolades, that, that actually get us the goodies of belonging in our families and at school and in our church groups, all of this stuff, right? Like you hear about this idea of like the good girl, right? Because we're rewarded for not getting our clothes dirty. We're rewarded for being quiet. We're rewarded for, acquiescing or being a good helper, right? All of that, we get all of these reinforcements. And so that's how we learn to be in the world. And we put away the parts that are maybe louder or a little bit more edgy, and we tuck away parts of our truth, and we create parts of our personality as a way to control experiences of difficult emotions. When we're very, very young, we don't have control over our environments. We can't leave our families if we're not happy with them. We are there and we're kind of stuck. And so we change ourselves in order to fit into that environment. And we create parts of ourselves to manage overwhelm, pain, shame, grief, right? All of these emotions that maybe weren't held with us or for us. And so we develop all these little parts, right? We develop like internal managers, right? Like ways to kind of protectors that come in to block experiences of pain and grief and shame and all that kind of stuff. So these are all of these different internal strategies that are managing us, how we manage ourselves, actually kind of get in the way of the evolutionary process that a soulful business is pulling you into. And everybody experiences these parts differently. Some people will have them as more thought-based. The people who follow me tend to be more embodied people. They tend to have experience with embodiment, so they'll experience them more as sensation. And sometimes we experience both. Sometimes the way that I experience them, because I come from a culture that is very much about embodiment and somaticizing symptoms, mental health symptoms, I've experienced them very much as sensation. And when I am about to loosen something, when I'm about to like clear some of them out of my system, or a piece of it out of my system rather, I start to experience them like my ego ramps up in my head. It almost like accelerates before it goes poof and it lets go. So these are not thought-based, which is why mindset alone or talk therapy will not resolve them. And I've been sadly, I've been in coaching containers, like, masterminds and things like that, where, people are feeling really frustrated with themselves because the mindset work isn't working. The coach is saying, you got to do mindset, you got to put yourself this and that, but they're having other experiences in their body that are getting in the way. They're having freeze responses. They're having, just other sensations that are very overwhelming that they don't know how to manage. And using sort of this mindset top-down strategy doesn't always work. These things go very, very deep in the body. And I'm not going to obviously be able to share with you the depth at which they go into the body. But just, from my experience in my 4-year trauma certification, it is really at the cellular level. This is so deep. These are unconscious decisions we make. So unconscious decisions are like, they're not verbal, they're not decisions that we make from a like a cognitive place. So accessing them, we access them through the body, through movement, through sound, through breath work, all that kind of stuff to really, do that deeper work. All right. So, yeah, so these exist at the level of personality. A lot of times we think, oh, this is just who we are, but really it is a system, like a very intricate system of like, protectors and pieces of the puzzle to sort of hold yourself together. Like it's like a structure. And identity work in business is about dissolving some of those structures and sort of putting together the parts that have been fragmented, the parts that have been left out. So the identity work answers the question, who do I need to be to show up in this business, right? Because oftentimes, we talk about the becoming process. And the way that I talk about that is like, sometimes we have to behave our way into something. It's not so much about fake it till you make it, but like stepping into the truth of who you are and who you came to be. And that can bring up, right? It is sort of a slow, unfolding, progressive growth process to step into that powerful, more powerful place. And that trust, the confidence, all of that is part of it. So it really bridges the gap between where you are now and where you need to be in order to commit to your vision, right? Because your business is a long-term relationship. So it is a commitment and recommitment. It requires consistent, aligned actions, right? Progressive, every day, like offering something, offering your energy to your business, because that energy comes back to you. And in order to make the money that you want to make, right? That is about, abundance, about holding yourself in that gap when the bank account does not reflect the reality that you want. How do you hold yourself through that? What comes up around that? So again, these protective parts go very deep into the body, and the more trauma you've experienced, the stronger those protective parts tend to be. And what I'm really talking about here, I'm going to do another live about collective trauma, that often comes up a lot too. But we're talking here about little t trauma. We're talking about attachment templates. We're talking about, I don't necessarily say things like insecure attachment or anything like that, but I'm really addressing the moments of overwhelm in your system where you had to develop strategies to gain power over and control of experiences of pain, just raw pain, fear, and shame. And these, the beauty of talking about this in your business is that they arise in all parts of your life. They arise in all relationships. And your business is a relationship. Your relationship with money is a relationship. Your relationship with God or spirit is a relationship. Your relationship to the land, all of it, it shows up everywhere. Yeah. So, and it shows up in your messaging, right? Whether it's how you write your copy, it shows up in how you show up on video, right? For example, I talk a lot about the internal audience, shifting your internal audience. Sometimes when we put our offer out there, when you put yourself out there, you do it from a place of expecting rejection. There's an assumption that you're going to be rejected. And because you're holding that schema, you're holding that experience in your body. So I just wanted to offer that as an example of like the way that we can sort of recreate some of that past pain that we experience if you actually experience bullying or rejection in your life. So yeah, and it affects your relationship with yourself as a coach or as a service provider, because it'll affect your clarity. It'll affect, some of the most difficult work that I've experienced in my business is like, who am I? What do I do? And who do I do it for? Right? Like those three questions, it's like, is a constant re-clarifying, because, we do experience little pivots and shifts in our business. As we grow and evolve, your business evolves as well. So with regard to these intimacy wounds, we all of us have all five, and we tend to prefer two or three as go-tos. So I'm going to present them to you. It's going to be kind of a quick overview, but I want to hear from you, like what pings and what comes up, and I'll come back after the live and answer your questions. So the first is, what sometimes can be called the avoider. The inner avoider tends to bypass difficult emotions such as pain and fear. It gets overwhelmed. This part gets overwhelmed really, really easily. It tends to find, spiritual solutions and feel good comforts. A friend of mine does this work does this work as well. And she talks about, this is the part that likes the spiritual memes, right? The sweet, like flowy memes, right? This is the part that kind of, can get obsessed with aligning the chakras and getting your energy right. So a lot of healing, a lot of focus on healing, but not so much on the actions taken, because those actions actually kick up the intensity of the things it doesn't want to feel. So the way that this part keeps itself safe, it tends to leave, it tends to sort of take itself out. It won't commit. And I experienced this part in my copy. Like, there's a way, and this is like a struggle for me sometimes, where I don't fully bring the message home, because there's a part of me that like leaves before fully committing to the message. And it's something that I always have to keep my eye on, because it's like, whoops, no, I want to, like, this is too intense, I got to leave. So the way this part can come up in your thoughts can be this feeling. It can be like a feeling in your body, or the thought that, no, like it doesn't matter, like I don't matter, or this offer I'm putting out doesn't matter, no one cares, why do it anyway, right? That can be sort of the thought loop that comes up. And with regard to sales, there can be, an avoidance of getting into sales. There can be this like an overwhelmed feeling when you actually have someone in front of you and you're like, feel like you're on the spot, having to, share your offer with them and how you work in a way that feels confident. Your nervous system just goes, and on video, it can show up as a spiritual perfectionism. You fear people seeing your whole humanity and your quirks, right? Sort of maybe the more unsavory parts of your personality, this came up for me, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, where an energy healer was telling me like, oh, your shadow is really pissed at you. And I was like, and I knew exactly what he was talking about, because I was showing up online in a way that was very spiritual. And I felt all that spirituality, but I wasn't sharing the sort of gnarly behind the scenes aspects of my personality, because I can be a real bitch, and I wasn't showing my bitchy side. And so now that I've got my bitchy side takes care of my social media presence, which is why you sometimes feel me like getting dommy on you in what I write, and sort of that gets to be there, the part of you that is like, come on, let's go. What's the deal, right? That's the part of my personality that is also part of my online presence. With regard to money, this part can feel overwhelmed by money, can feel overwhelmed by the thought of even taking care of it. So this part is, as you can sort of feel, it's not really grounded. It's not like, it might have a neglectful relationship with money, because it sees money as this earthly thing, and it doesn't want to do the earthly thing. It wants to sort of stay in the spiritual realms. There's like a fear of like getting into its dark humanity. There's a fear of getting annihilated and overwhelmed by those, like maybe a rage or anger, or like those intense emotions. And so from the aspect of the shadow, there's this part says like, I won't commit to fully being here. I'm not going to be embodied. I'm not going to like take care of my money, because money is so like, it'll come up with some story about money. Yeah, so it's like, and yeah, they won't be here. So the superpower of this part is sensitivity and intuition. Like, people who have this intimacy wound strongly in their system tend to be really, really intuitive, right? You probably, being a mystic coach or a soulpreneur, probably have this very strongly, like a strong sensitivity. You may feel energetically permeable, which is like, it requires energetic boundaries, but it can be a real gift when you're working with clients, because you can really feel them, right? So in terms of nervous system and integration, this part, in order to integrate, has to feel permission to go into safely the darker aspects of humanity. It needs to know that that it's not bad or separate from your spirituality to be allowed to feel this. And in order to do that, you have to go very slowly. This part gets scared very easily. It has to do a lot of grounding, and it has to find pleasure in just being human. So let me know if that resonates at all. I know this is a lot of information, and I'll go through it a little bit quicker. So the second intimacy wound is the overgiver. And it's one of my favorites because it's like, it's also often called the people pleaser. And, I don't really love those labels because it's not, I feel like we need to sort of show up for these parts of ourselves with compassion. But it's the part of us that, maybe won't set really good boundaries. Maybe it does sort of tend to be in a fawn response. And we sort of abandon ourselves in the process of going out to other people and wanting to serve them, but we're not truly serving ourselves at the same time. Maybe we betray ourselves with the low prices, or we don't really speak our truth fully because we're afraid that people are going to abandon us, or they're going to like fly off of our email list or something. And that safety strategy, the safety strategy of this part is to merge with other people, right? Is to sort of merge your needs with other people, but they abandon themselves and their needs. And the way this shows up as a thought pattern is that you sometimes feel like you're not enough, right? Or something is not enough, right? Time is not enough. There's not enough time. There's not enough money. There's just a sense of not enoughness. And what it is a real internal sense of emptiness that gets sort of played out in all these different domains of your life. There's not enough love, right? And sometimes we fill that hole by trying to help other people, by trying to be useful to other people. And in the sales process, right? In the messaging, it can be sort of like me kind of energy. In sales, please buy from me energy, right? Which actually is sort of a form of incongruence, and it inadvertently puts people off. Like it attracts the wrong people. It attracts people who are more takers, who are like, yeah, give it to me. Yeah. Oh my God, I love this cheap price. Can you give me more? And then the person is like, oh, okay, I can give you this and I can include this. And then you start adding all these things and then you become resentful because you're giving out from a place of like, you're not really filling in at the same time. So, you might, in video, it might show up as like wanting to seek approval. You tend to be like nice, or you tame more of the fiery expression. And with money, you might spend a lot. You might sort of be the kind of like spending type, or you might hoard it. So it has these polarities. Money will never feel like enough, right? Maybe you hoard it, or if you feel like you want to make people like you, you might overspend it. And the real fear here is abandonment. So from the shadow perspective, there's like a martyrdom that comes through the overgiving, right? Like, oh, I won't need, I don't need, other people need, right? And so you're really projecting, you're denying your needs and projecting them out onto other people. And the superpower of this intimacy wound is empathy, generosity, and pleasure. This part has such a capacity to give, but it has to do it from a place of abundance in order to feel internally balanced, right? There has to be a process of unshaming need. It has to be a process of satisfying needs. And I do this like through a process of like body listening, really, we're going to do this later. Listening to your need and responding to it, and allowing yourself to slow down, to fill up with pleasure. Give yourself the things that you give to other people, and really attach to like, there's a part of you that leaves yourself to go out to other people. That part has to be sort of reeled back in to the body, and that healthy attachment has to be developed to yourself. So I'm just looking at the comments here. Hey Tessa, hey Teresa. So the third intimacy wound is the saboteur. And again, like when I don't like to use the word self-sabotage, because we're not trying to intentionally harm ourselves. It really is just coming from a place of fear. And so we have to be literate around how fear is arising in our bodies. We're not, as humans, we're not trained to track fear in our bodies. And that's what my 4-step process actually helps with. So the saboteur tends to remain stuck in inaction and overanalysis. It can be a procrastinator. It will take a step forward and then withdraw. And there's a sense of like resentment in the business that feels like it has to kind of plod on, like it feels burdened by the tasks of having to show up, because there's a story it's made up about it needing to be hard. And if things kind of go too well, they turn to bust things up. Like they turn a boom into a bust, because there's an upper limit on the amount of joy that they're willing to let in, because they have that story that it needs to be hard. So the strategy is to resist joy and ease and to hide the true self, which is sort of like a more tender part of the self. And one of the pattern thoughts is like the way that it shows up in our thinking, or maybe a sensation, is like there's this feeling of having to hold it all, right? Oh, this is so hard. It's hard. Yeah, growth is hard, and this is hard. Yeah, right? That kind of thing. So in sales, right, in your messaging, in the sales process, it will tend to complain about people. It tends to externalize blame. It may blame others for the lack of success. On video, you will probably, hide yourself. You might experience like terror in really like showing your heart and really like allowing yourself to be free online. With money, you might feel burdened managing money. You might not spend it on things that are pleasurable to you. You just may be like, oh no, to pay the bills, and be really sort of regimented and rigid about that. And the underlying fear is humiliation. It can come up as fearing like being ridiculed online. It fears not being able to hold it all. It feels like it has to hold it all, but at the same time, it's afraid to hold it all. And what the shadow says in this place is like, oh, I love negativity. I love to complain. I won't be responsible, right? So I'm just going to externalize all the blame, and I won't take responsibility for how I'm not showing up. And the superpower here to this part is like, these people in this strategy are very like steadfast. They're supportive. They're a beacon of groundedness. They have a lot of diplomacy. So they're the kind of folks like you can really rely on them. They're just very, very grounded. And in terms of the nervous system integration piece, there's like, what I want to say is that it has to eventually, like over time, over incremental steps, it has to be safe to express your authenticity, right? To do it little by little, allowing it to be safe to move your body, to take up space with your body, and to share your real self. And that again happens over time with, in progressive, gentle, unfolding, evolving steps. So the fourth intimacy wound is the strategist. So this tends to have a shaming inner voice. It tends to have tends to manage the external image due to fear of vulnerability or shame around vulnerability. It tends to push people away because of the vulnerability piece, because it doesn't want to, it hides the vulnerability, it hides the messiness, it hides the humanity, It won't let people see them. These are oftentimes, these are powerful leaders, but they also feel very lonely sometimes because they keep people away from those deeper, more vulnerable parts of themselves. And the strategy that they've, like their protection is that they try to gain control of fear and vulnerability. So fear and vulnerability is not something that they want to feel. It's something that's very much in a vault under lock and key. And they lead with their will. So they have like a very strong will center, and they tend to sort of be critical, and that's why they tend to have a critical inner voice as well, but it's different than the inner critic. It's more of a shaming inner voice. So there's a sense inside that they don't feel good enough, but it's a different level. It's really about the authenticity, not being good enough. So in messaging, it might, sales and messaging, it might come up. Hi, Karina. It might show up as like subtle manipulation in order to get sales. Like maybe it's like, typical poking into pain points, for example. On video, it might be being seductive or charming or fun, but not vulnerable. And these people, people in this strategy tend to make money pretty easily. So generating wealth isn't a problem, right? It's really about the connection piece. They tend not to attract the right aligned client because their messaging they're not offering their hearts. They're not opening their hearts and offering their hearts and their vulnerability. So they're attracting people that are not aligned. There's again the fear of vulnerability, because this part associates vulnerability with powerlessness and lack of safety. So they're not going to feel unsafe. It's not something that we tend to want to feel. And so from the shadow perspective, it's just like, it's my way or the highway, or I won't let you see me. This part does not trust. It does not trust that when they invest in their business, that the business is necessarily going to love them back or support them, right? And so that can fuel like a sense of overwork too, because they don't trust that they're going to be supported. They feel like sometimes they withhold their vulnerability, like I said. So all of these ways that they hold themselves back and don't allow themselves to be seen. And the superpower here is courage and charisma, right? Like the places that we get hurt are the places that we are here to actually offer the world. Because this part doesn't tend to feel fear, it can show up very courageously in ways that maybe other people who feel their fear more strongly can't or won't or don't. So part of the nervous system integration and safety, they have to learn to express vulnerability in a way that feels safe to them. They have to befriend their fears, and then they have to sort of incorporate that into their message, into their online presence, into their image, right? Because it's like, when you're a coach, your brand is not the fancy fonts or the colors. It is how you make people feel. Okay. So the final intimacy wound showing up in your business is the inner critic. And this is the part that looks externally for solutions, right? It wants a right way to do things. It's convinced that it just needs one more business course. It just needs another thing because it doesn't have the answers, and it just needs one more thing, right? It has that like a little bit of a grasping quality because it doesn't trust itself. It doesn't trust itself that it already knows, because it's disconnected from intuition, right? So it's kind of a more heady aspect to ourselves. It tends to intellectualize, and there's some imposter stuff that comes up around this part, because we're not in the self-trust. We're not anchored in ourselves and in the fact that we already know things, and we don't need to get another thing out there as a solution. So we look, we're always like finding solutions. but the solutions are inside and they're not really connected to that. I say they, but it's kind of like, we, me, I, you. So from the strategy part, it tends to reference externally. So it tends to look externally for solutions, and bringing the, part of the way that you integrate it is really bringing the energy back inward, i.e. learning to feel your emotions, learning to trust your intuition, really connecting with the body, connecting to intuition through the body, and learning to follow, its own desires, its own way, its own solutions. And some of the ways that this shows up as like a thought pattern can be like, something's wrong with me, right? Like I don't have the solution, so I need to like find it, or I'm not enough. That's not enough is a theme that sort of connects to these different parts in different ways, different levels of not enough-ness. There's a sense that, they may feel like they are their performance. They may feel like they have to perform. Maybe on a call like this, they feel like they have to perform, or on a group coaching call, they feel like they're on the spot and they have to kind of like, right? They kind of gets held up in the body in this way. And the fear underneath all of that is the fear of rejection, the fear of being canceled, the fear of losing followers, the fear of being criticized or called out. And sometimes, because this can show up as a perfectionist, maybe we'll delay putting our offer out there because we're still like tweaking the sales page, or it has to be just right, and we're sort of manage our image in this way. And there's a lot of, because this is so performance based, there's a lot of hustle tied into this part. Feels like it has to continually perform, show up, but not from a place of really like joy and desire and sort of an organic way of being. So the shadow piece around this is like, I won't feel, right? Because they learned to go to things more with the head, or I won't surrender, or someone is to blame for something and I have to fix it, or I have to go out there, somebody has the answers, right? I don't trust myself, or I won't trust myself. So the superpower here is emotion and structure. Even though this part doesn't trust emotions, the nervous system integration, safety and integration is through emotions, like I said earlier. And these folks, people who have this strong intimacy wound, have a really big capacity for structure. They are able to they're organized, they create systems really well. So we need people like that in the world who can create systems and strategies and structures, and then they need to sort of complement it with more of the flow piece. So I hope that makes sense to all of you. Let me know what's coming up around that. So I just wanted to, 40 minutes. So I wanted to briefly talk about the 4-step release process, because when these parts of us form, we all grow up in families where we know we're loved. Our parents tell us they love us, but we don't often feel like all these parts are loved. And so part of the process is us loving them and sort of bringing them in, folding them in, instead of having them compartmentalized and elsewhere. And love, the experience of love, comes in the form of attunement, right? We do inner attunement processes in order to integrate them, in order to heal sort of the inner schisms. Some people call it like, inner marriage, right? Bringing these pieces together, or healing inner division, so that you're not undivided, you're not fragmented, you're showing up in your wholeness. It all comes back to wholeness, congruence, right? That type of stuff. So the first step is to attune to what's happening in your body. It's about noticing the sensations that are arising in your body, noticing the thought patterns. And because this is body-based, you want to just be, the mind will do its sort of monkey thing, but you want to be moving towards the sensations in your body from a place of curiosity, because often we have this experience and we're like, oh, why am I feeling this? Oh, this is so inconvenient. Or like, I'm frustrated with this. Like, why am I here again? Some of these things can come up as freeze responses because they're fear-based, because they're overwhelm-based. I'm talking nervous system work here. So you want to move towards it with curiosity, and you want to offer it breath, because breath down regulates the nervous system, right? And it's like it grounds you in a place of safety so that you can actually begin working with these parts. So the first step is attune. The second step is relate. So you want to be noticing, right? Because these are intimacy wounds. These are relational wounds. You want to notice and observe how you feel towards this part, right? Maybe you're working with shame, right? Nobody likes to talk about shame or fear, but these are the primary emotions I work with. You want to be exploring or asking yourself, what is your relationship to this shamed part? What is your relationship to fear? Some people talk about fuck your fears, get rid of your fears. I don't believe that is effective. We tend to override when we fuck our fears. I want to invite you to befriend your fears and work with fear, right? Bring it on board so that you're not pushing against it and creating more resistance, more fear. So you want to ask yourself, what is my relationship to this fearful part? What is my relationship to the part that wants to is really wanting to get the fuck out of here? Or what is my relationship to the part that wants to push people away, right? And so we move towards it with this. The third step is moving towards it with from a place of compassion, right? So step 3 is respond. So we want to ask it what it needs. We want to ask what this part needs. We want to move towards it from a place of compassion. I often call it like the devoted lover, like your inner devoted lover approaching that part of you, the hurt part, the frightened part, the angry part, the ragey part, whatever it happens to is, even the shadow part, right? The very protective, right? Part. You want to respond to it from that devoted lover. You want to just ask it what it needs. You want to be offering it attuned presence, and you want to listen to what it needs from you. And sometimes there are other protective parts that want to come in and be like, oh no, it's okay, everything's going to be okay, to avoid feeling the real feelings that are underneath, right? And so we have to be aware of those and move those aside, any stories that are extraneous or protective, and to really be with this part, really be in relationship with this part, and to stay with it, to be in relationship for as long as it needs. Sometimes these parts just want to be acknowledged. They don't need anything in particular, any particular action, but just be with me. Don't leave me alone, or I'm just scared, and just hang out with me. And so we can do that internally with ourselves. The fourth step is align. So you want to, feel this part and then get this part on board. You want to be like, okay, we're really afraid. I get that. And there's this bigger vision we have. There's this desire that we have to these goals in our business. We want to create freedom for people. I made a bodhisattva vow to liberate others by liberating myself. And can we get on board with that? And maybe the fearful part is yeah, I'm really scared, but I'm down with that, right? And so this is how we work with our internal parts to get to a place where we can recommit to the vision and decide how we're going to decide to move with the vision and not decide to move with the fear or allow yourself to collapse in the fear. So it really is about exercising the power of choice in your relationship with your business, and it builds safety and trust over time. So the steps are attune, relate, respond, and align. So I hope this was helpful. I really enjoyed sharing this with you. And again, I know that it was very, very quick, but and when we're working together, like in my one-on-one work, in group work, it really is about practicing this 4-step attunement process to the point where you get so well practiced and good at it that, even though we stop working together after 6 months or 9 months, this is something that you can always come back to. This process works, right? You can always come back to it and, go to the steps again and deepen the places that keep coming up in your business, and thus like be in that ever unfolding process of becoming who you need to be to build your business in a way that feels good to you, in a way that loves you back. Thank you for watching, and let me know your thoughts and feelings. I want to hear them. All right. Bye, everybody.